Every summer it happens. You start the season with optimism. You buy the seeds or the seedlings. You set up the containers. You water carefully. You follow the advice. And then, somewhere around July, it starts falling apart. The leaves go pale, then yellow, then crispy at the edges. The tomatoes that were flowering stop setting fruit. The herbs bolt or shrivel. The plants that looked so promising in May look exhausted by August. And you do what anyone does. You water more. You add fertilizer. You move the pots into shade. You check for pests. You try everything you can think of. And it still happens. Again. The same way it happened last summer. And the summer before that. If this is your experience, if summer is the season that breaks your garden every single year, I want to tell you something important before we go any further. It is not your fault. It is not your watering schedule. It is not your fertilizer choice. It is not the heat, the sun exposure, or the variety of plant you chose. Those things matter, but they are not why your summer garden fails. Your summer garden fails because of something happening underground that nobody talks about, something that no amount of watering can fix, because watering is not the problem, something that happens to your soil biology every year when temperatures rise, and that quietly destroys your plant's ability to feed itself long before you see any symptoms on the surface. Once you understand this mechanism, once you see what is actually happening in your soil during a heat wave, you will never approach summer gardening the same way again. And more importantly, you will finally be able to stop it. The conventional wisdom about summer gardening goes something like this. Heat stresses plants. Heat causes water to evaporate faster. So summer problems are water problems. Water more, water deeper, water at the right time of day, maybe add some fertilizer to push through the stress, maybe provide some shade. This advice is not wrong, but it is dramatically incomplete. And the part it leaves out is the part that's actually causing your garden to fail. Here is the question nobody is asking. What happens to the soil when temperatures rise? Not what happens to the plant. Not what happens to the water. What happens to the living ecosystem inside the container, the bacteria, the fungi, the microbial community that your plant depends on to feed itself? Let me walk you through what soil science actually tells us about this. At soil temperatures below 20 degrees Celsius, most beneficial soil bacteria and fungi are active, reproducing, and processing organic matter efficiently. Your soil biology is functioning well. Nutrients are being converted into bioavailable forms constantly. As soil temperatures rise from 20 to 28 degrees, microbial activity actually accelerates, up to a point. Warmer temperatures mean faster metabolic rates, faster decomposition, faster nutrient cycling. In this range, a healthy soil biology can support very vigorous plant growth, which is why early summer, before the real heat sets in, is often the most productive period. But here's where it breaks. Above 28 to 30 degrees Celsius soil temperature, not air temperature, soil temperature, the most beneficial organisms in your container begin to experience stress. Above 35 degrees, many of the key species of mycorrhizal fungi, the ones that extend your plant's root reach by factors of 10 to 1,000, begin to die off. Above 40 degrees Celsius soil temperature, which is completely achievable in a dark-colored plastic container sitting on a sun-exposed surface in summer, the vast majority of the beneficial microbial community you built up through spring becomes dormant or dies. Soil temperature in containers runs significantly hotter than air temperature. On a 30 degrees Celsius day, the soil in a black plastic pot exposed to direct sun can reach 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. In a 35-degree heat wave, that soil can hit temperatures that would sterilize a laboratory sample. You are not gardening in heat. Your plant is gardening in something close to a biological oven. And you are responding to this by watering more, which helps. It cools the soil temporarily, it prevents water stress, but it does not restore the microbial community that has died. It does not rebuild the fungal networks. It does not replace the biological infrastructure your plant was using to feed itself. This is why your summer garden fails at the same point every year, not because of what's happening above the soil, because of what's being destroyed below it. The plant you're watering in August is not the same plant it was in May. It's the same genetics, the same stem, the same roots, but it's operating without the biological support system it had at its most productive. It's working alone in soil that can no longer feed it, no matter how much water or fertilizer you add on top. Understanding this changes everything about how you approach summer, because the solution isn't more inputs. The solution is protecting and restoring the biology before, during, and after the heat. Let me go through exactly how summer heat damages your container soil biology, and why each mechanism compounds the others into a cascade of failure that no single intervention can fix. Mechanism 1. Direct microbial die-off from temperature. The most direct effect. As I described above, the beneficial bacterial and fungal species that process nutrients and support root health have optimum temperature ranges that do not extend to the extremes of summer container soil. Different species die off at different thresholds. The mycorrhizal fungi, arguably the most valuable organisms in the soil for plant nutrition, are particularly temperature sensitive. These fungi form networks that connect to plant roots and extend their reach into soil spaces the roots themselves cannot access. They retrieve phosphorus, water, and micronutrients from far beyond the root zone in exchange for sugars the plant produces. Without them, your plant's effective root reach drops dramatically. Beneficial bacteria that fix nitrogen, converting atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available ammonium, also have relatively narrow temperature tolerances. When these populations decline, your plant's nitrogen supply drops even if your soil contains organic nitrogen sources, because those sources cannot be converted without the organisms doing the conversion. Mechanism 2, disruption of the carbon-nitrogen balance. When soil temperatures rise and microbial activity accelerates in the 20 to 28 degree range, organic matter decomposes faster. This is initially beneficial. Faster decomposition means faster nutrient release. But there's a limit. If the organic matter in your container soil decomposes too rapidly, which is exactly what happens in an overheated container through a long summer, you can exhaust the organic matter reserve before the season ends. By August, there is simply less carbon-based material in the soil for organisms to process and for the soil structure to rely on. This is why soil in containers that have been through a hot summer often looks and feels different at the end of the season. Thinner, darker, more compacted, less alive. The organic content has been burned through. A soil with depleted organic matter has reduced water retention, reduced cation exchange capacity, its ability to hold nutrients for plant uptake, and reduced microbial habitat. Every negative consequence multiplies. Mechanism 3, water evaporation and osmotic stress on microorganisms. Water is as essential to soil microorganisms as it is to plants. Most soil bacteria live in water films on soil particles, thin layers of moisture that connect microbial communities and allow them to move, feed, and reproduce. When the soil surface dries rapidly in heat, which happens faster in containers than in garden beds because of the limited volume and the heat absorption of the container walls, these water films break down. Microbial communities become isolated. Movement and reproduction slow or stop. In severe drying events, osmotic stress kills entire populations. The gardener's response, watering more frequently, restores the water films temporarily. But the damage to the microbial community during the dry period cannot be instantly repaired by adding water. You can rehydrate a desert, but the ecosystem that was living in it doesn't return the moment it rains. Consistent moisture, not wet, not bone dry, but consistently moist throughout the soil profile is as important to your soil biology as it is to your plant roots. And maintaining that consistency in a container during a heat wave is significantly harder than most gardeners realize. Mechanism 4, salt accumulation from summer fertilizer applications. This is the mechanism that most people inadvertently make worse with their summer intervention. When plants show heat stress, pale leaves, slow growth, dropping flowers, the instinct is to fertilize. Add more nutrition, push through the problem. And synthetic fertilizers, by their chemical nature, are salt-based compounds. Applied repeatedly through a hot summer, they build up salt concentration in the limited soil volume of a container. High salt concentration is hostile to soil microorganisms. It draws water out of microbial cells through osmosis, the same process that kills them in drought conditions, but caused chemically rather than physically. So the sequence runs like this. Heat kills the biology. Growth slows, the gardener fertilizes to compensate, the fertilizer salts further suppress the remaining biology, growth slows further, more fertilizer is applied. Each application compounds the damage from the last. By late summer, the soil in a heavily fertilized container can be nearly biologically sterile, not because of the heat alone, but because of the heat combined with repeated salt-based feeding. A simple electrical conductivity test, EC meters are inexpensive and widely available, will tell you instantly whether salt accumulation is a problem in your containers. A reading above 3.5 millisiemens per centimeter is inhibitory to most soil organisms. I've tested containers that were being fertilized weekly through summer and found readings above 6.0 millisiemens per centimeter. That is a hostile environment. Nothing beneficial lives comfortably in it. Mechanism 5. pH drift under heat stress. The final mechanism is the subtlest, but it affects everything else. Soil pH governs which nutrients are available to plant roots and which soil organisms can survive. Most beneficial bacteria and fungi prefer a pH range of 6.0 to 7.5. Most vegetable crops feed most efficiently at 6.0 to 7.0. Under heat stress, several things happen to soil pH simultaneously. Microbial die-off releases compounds that acidify the soil. Increased water evaporation concentrates any acidic compounds present. In peat-based mixes, which are the base of most commercial potting soils, natural acidification continues even without heat stress, and heat accelerates it. The result: containers that started spring at a healthy pH of 6.5 can drift to 5.5 or even lower by midsummer. At pH 5.5, phosphorus availability drops significantly. Iron and manganese can reach levels that are actually toxic to plants. Calcium and magnesium, essential for fruit development and leaf health, become less available. Your plant is not just short on nutrition in a midsummer slump. It is living in a chemical environment that is actively blocking the nutrition that is physically present in the soil. And because the biology that would normally buffer pHi, the microbial activity that produces stabilizing compounds, has been compromised by the same heat event, there is nothing correcting the drift. The system that keeps itself in balance has been switched off. Most of the summer symptoms gardeners experience and attribute to heat or water stress are actually symptoms of the biological collapse I just described. And because they're misdiagnosed, they're treated with the wrong interventions, which often make things worse. Let me walk you through the most common ones. Symptom: pale green or yellowing leaves. Common diagnosis: nitrogen deficiency. Add fertilizer. What's actually happening? The microbial population that converts organic nitrogen into ammonium and nitrate has declined. The nitrogen is present in the soil in organic form. It just cannot be converted without the biology. Adding synthetic nitrogen provides a short-term boost, but further suppresses the biology with salt loading. The pallor returns within 2 to 3 weeks. The correct intervention: restore the biology with a worm-casting top dress and a light application of liquid worm-casting tea. Shade the container to reduce soil temperature. The organisms will recover and begin converting nitrogen again within 10 to 14 days. Symptom: blossom drop. Flowers forming but falling before fruit sets. Common diagnosis: inconsistent watering or temperature shock. What's actually happening? Blossom set requires the plant to be in a state of genuine nutritional surplus. It takes significant resources to develop and hold a flower through to fruit. A plant operating on depleted biology in degraded summer soil is not in surplus. It is in deficit. It is shedding the most metabolically expensive structures, the flowers, to conserve resources for basic survival. Watering more does not create a nutritional surplus. Only a functioning soil biology can do that consistently. The correct intervention: reduce the plant's metabolic burden, remove competing growth tips, reduce container temperature, restore biology. A foliar spray of dilute seaweed extract provides trace minerals and natural growth hormones that can help the plant hold existing flowers while the soil biology recovers. Symptom: brown leaf edges and crispy tips. Common diagnosis: sun scorch or heat stress. Provide shade. What's actually happening? Brown leaf edges in summer are frequently a calcium deficiency symptom. Calcium moves through the plant via transpiration. It's pulled up through the roots in water and distributed to the leaf tips. When transpiration is disrupted by heat, calcium delivery fails at the extremities first. The same symptom affects fruit. Blossom end rot in tomatoes is calcium deficiency at the developing fruit tip, caused by the same disrupted delivery system. Shading helps by reducing transpiration demand. But the underlying issue is often that calcium availability has dropped as pH drifted or salt concentration rose. Both of those are biology-related problems. The correct intervention: a dilute calcium foliar spray, calcium nitrate at very low concentration, bypasses the root system and delivers calcium directly to the leaf tissue. Simultaneously, treat the soil pH with a light application of agricultural lime or calcium carbonate to bring pH back towards 6.5 and restore calcium availability at the root level. Symptom: wilting despite adequate watering. Common diagnosis: root rot or overwatering. Reduce water. What's actually happening? When mycorrhizal fungi die off in heat-stressed soil, the plant's effective root reach contracts dramatically. Mycorrhizal networks can extend the reach of a root system by up to 1,000 times its physical length. Without them, the root system that physically exists in your container is doing all the water uptake work alone. This can result in wilting even in moist soil. The roots are unable to move water to the canopy fast enough to keep up with summer transpiration demand, not because the water isn't there, but because the infrastructure to access it has been reduced. The correct intervention. Reducing water is exactly the wrong response. The priority is restoring the fungal community, which takes time, and temporarily reducing the plant's transpiration load through shading and by removing some leaf mass to reduce demand. Symptom: stunted growth that doesn't respond to fertilizer. Common diagnosis: root bound, needs a bigger pot. What's actually happening, sometimes this is accurate, but in summer, stunted growth that doesn't respond to fertilizer is a strong indicator of salt accumulation. The high EC environment is actively suppressing root function and microbial activity simultaneously. Adding more fertilizer, which is what most gardeners try, worsens the salt level and deepens the stagnation. The correct intervention: flush the container thoroughly with clean water, apply 3 to 4 times the container volume, and allow it to drain completely. This dilutes and washes out accumulated salts. Then wait 2 weeks before any further fertilization. Allow the biology to reestablish before you add any more chemical inputs. The most effective strategy against summer biological collapse is prevention. Protecting your soil biology before temperatures rise is dramatically more effective and dramatically cheaper than trying to restore it once it's been damaged. Here's the protocol I now follow every year, starting in late spring before the first real heat arrives. Step 1. Insulate your containers. Container wall temperature is the primary driver of soil overheating. A dark plastic pot in direct sun absorbs solar radiation and conducts that heat directly into your soil. Insulating the container walls keeps soil temperature in the biologically safe range even when air temperatures are high. Options, in order of effectiveness: wrap containers in burlap, hessian, or light-colored fabric secured with twine. This creates an insulating air layer and reflects some solar radiation. Soil temperature reduction: 5 to 8 degrees Celsius on a hot day. Double pot your containers. Place the growing pot inside a slightly larger pot with a gap between them packed with straw, coir, or even crumpled newspaper. The air and organic material in the gap is an excellent insulator. Soil temperature reduction: 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. Switch to light-colored, thick-walled containers, white, cream, or terracotta rather than black or dark green plastic. Light colors reflect rather than absorb solar radiation. Terracotta breathes, which naturally moderates soil temperature through evaporative cooling at the container wall. A 10-degree reduction in peak soil temperature during a heat wave is the difference between a functioning microbial community and a collapsing one. This single intervention can preserve your soil biology through conditions that would otherwise destroy it. Step 2. Apply a protective mulch layer. The soil surface is the most vulnerable point for heat and moisture loss. A 3 to 5 centimeter layer of organic mulch on the surface of your containers does 3 things simultaneously. It reflects solar radiation and dramatically reduces surface soil temperature. The layer under a good mulch can be 10 to 15 degrees cooler than an exposed surface on the same hot day. It slows evaporation from the soil surface, maintaining the moisture films that microbial communities depend on. Containers mulched with straw or similar material need significantly less frequent watering in summer. In my experience, roughly 30 to 40% less. It slowly breaks down from the bottom, continuously adding organic material to the soil surface that the remaining microbial community can process. Any organic mulch material works: straw, sugarcane mulch, wood chips, dried leaves, coconut coir fiber. Avoid materials that are too fine and compact, like grass clippings applied thickly, as these can seal the surface and prevent gas exchange. Step 3. Inoculate with biology before the heat arrives. The goal here is to build the largest, most robust microbial population possible before temperatures rise, so that even when heat kills a proportion of the community, enough survives to maintain function. 2 inputs work together here. Worm castings applied as a top dress in late spring, 2 to 3 centimeters worked gently into the soil surface, dramatically boost bacterial and fungal populations. The microbial density in fresh worm castings can reach 1 billion colony-forming units per gram. You are seeding your soil with a population surge before the stress arrives. Mycorrhizal inoculant, a powder containing spores of beneficial fungi available from garden stores or online, applied directly to root systems at transplanting or worked into the soil surface of established plants. These fungi establish networks that are more heat tolerant than naturally occurring populations and provide a replacement network if the native fungi die off during heat events. Neither of these is expensive. A small bag of mycorrhizal inoculant costs $8 to $15 and is enough for many applications. Worm castings, as covered in previous videos, cost $2 to $5 per liter or can be produced at home for free. Step 4. Pre-adjust pH before summer, because heat will push your pH down through the summer. Starting the season with a slightly alkaline buffer gives you a margin of safety. If your spring soil pH tests between 6.0 and 6.5, ideal for most vegetables, consider a light application of dolomite lime worked into the top of the soil. Dolomite raises pH slowly and also provides calcium and magnesium, two nutrients that become deficient in summer stress conditions. Aim to start summer at 6.5 to 7.0 if your soil tests acidic in spring. By peak summer, the drift will bring you back to the optimal 6.0 to 6.5 range rather than crashing below 5.5. Step 5. Adjust your watering strategy. Summer watering is not just about volume. Timing and depth matter more than frequency. Water deeply and infrequently rather than shallowly and often. A shallow daily water wets only the top few centimeters of soil, which then dries and rehydrates repeatedly, creating a boom-bust cycle for surface microbial communities. A deeper, less frequent water that saturates the full root zone and then allows it to partially dry maintains more consistent conditions through the profile. Water in the early morning, before sunrise if possible, so the soil surface has time to absorb water before solar radiation begins heating it. Evening watering raises humidity around foliage overnight, which can encourage fungal disease on leaves. Add a small amount of liquid worm casting tea or diluted seaweed extract to your watering can once every 2 weeks through summer. This delivers microbial reinforcements and trace minerals with each deep watering, continuously seeding the biology rather than relying on a one-time application to last the entire season. If you're watching this in the middle of summer and your garden is already struggling, if the symptoms I described are already happening, this section is for you. Recovery is possible. It takes time, and it requires doing the right things in the right order. But I have restored severely heat-stressed containers to productive growth within 4 to 6 weeks using this protocol, and I want to walk you through it step by step. Week 1, stop the bleeding. Before you add anything, reduce the stress load. If the containers are in direct sun and the soil temperature is very high, move them into partial shade, 4 to 6 hours of direct sun rather than full day. The temporary reduction in photosynthetic efficiency is a worthwhile trade for the cooling effect on the soil. Apply insulation to the container walls immediately. Wrap them in burlap or double pot with insulating material. Apply mulch to the soil surface. Do not fertilize this week. Do not add anything. You are simply removing the worst of the heat stress before you try to rebuild. If you suspect high salt accumulation, white crust on the soil surface, history of heavy synthetic fertilizer use, flush the containers now. 3 to 4 full flushes, allowing complete drainage between each. Week 2. Biology first. Now you begin rebuilding the biological community. Top dress with worm castings, a 2 centimeter layer worked gently into the top of the soil. Do not disturb deeper roots. Prepare a casting tea, a handful of castings and 5 liters of water stirred and left for an hour, and use it as your watering solution for the next 2 weeks. Apply it at the root zone, not as a foliar spray. If you can find mycorrhizal inoculant, water it in around the root zone per the product instructions. It will begin establishing new fungal networks over the following weeks. Do not fertilize yet. The biology cannot function in high salt conditions, and the salt levels need to stabilize after the flush before you add more. Weeks 3 and 4, support without overloading. As the biology begins to reestablish, you can introduce very gentle nutritional support. Seaweed extract, diluted to half the label rate, applied as a foliar spray, provides trace minerals and natural growth hormones without the salt loading of synthetic fertilizers. Apply every 5 to 7 days. A dilute fish emulsion, quarter strength, applied as a soil drench, provides organic nitrogen in a slow-release form that the recovering microbial community can process without being overwhelmed. Watch the plant closely. Look for new growth, particularly new healthy leaves at the growing tips. This is your primary indicator that the biology is recovering and the plant is feeding again. Once you see consistent new growth, the worst is over. Weeks 5 and 6, restore productivity. By weeks 5 and 6, a successfully recovering container will show consistent new growth, improving leaf color, and in fruiting plants, the return of flower buds. At this point, you can introduce a gentle organic fertilizer at normal rates, worm casting tea weekly, a liquid seaweed or fish emulsion every 2 weeks. The biology is now robust enough to process these inputs efficiently. If your plants have lost a lot of foliage or structure during the stress period, consider a light pruning to remove dead or damaged material. This directs the plant's recovering resources toward new productive growth rather than maintaining stressed tissue. Your containers will not be at peak productivity for the rest of this season. The stress event and recovery period cost time, but they will be functional for the remainder of summer and early autumn, and the biology you've rebuilt will carry over to give you a stronger start next season. I want to address something that sits underneath all of this, the question of plant selection. Because even with perfect soil biology protection, some plants are significantly better equipped to handle summer container conditions than others. And choosing the right plants for peak summer URI while transitioning vulnerable ones to other seasons is one of the highest leverage decisions a container gardener can make. Heat tolerant in containers. Sweet potatoes are arguably the best summer container crop available. They are warm season plants that thrive in heat, are relatively forgiving of soil biology disruption, because they've evolved in nutrient poor conditions, and produce a substantial calorie-dense harvest, even under stress. A single large container of sweet potato will produce across the entire summer with minimal inputs. Eggplant, more heat tolerant than tomatoes, more forgiving of moisture and consistency, and actually produces better fruit at higher temperatures than it does in cooler conditions. If you're struggling with tomatoes in summer, try eggplant in the same containers, and you'll likely be surprised by the difference. Basil loves heat. Full sun, high temperatures, basil accelerates. The challenge with basil in summer is bolting, which you manage by consistent harvesting of the growing tips, not by trying to lower the temperature. Climbing beans and snake beans are prolific summer producers that fix atmospheric nitrogen, meaning they actually improve soil biology rather than depleting it. A container trellis of climbing beans through summer can rehabilitate depleted soil while producing a harvest. Okra is almost perversely heat tolerant. It originates in the hot zones of West Africa and performs best when temperatures most other plants find intolerable. If you've never grown okra in containers, summer is when it will reward you most. Heat-vulnerable crops that need repositioning. Tomatoes, despite their summer association, actually prefer to flower and set fruit at temperatures between 18 and 27 degrees Celsius. Above 30 degrees air temperature, pollen becomes non-viable and fruit set stops regardless of soil health. This is why the best tomato harvest often comes from spring-planted crops that fruit through late spring and early summer before peak heat, or from autumn crops planted in late summer that produce heavily as temperatures cool. Lettuce and leafy greens bolt within days of sustained heat exposure. These are autumn, winter, and spring crops in most climates. Trying to grow them through midsummer is fighting biology rather than working with it. Broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage are cool season crops that suffer physiologically in heat regardless of soil biology status. Move these to autumn. Understanding the seasonal rhythm of different crops and matching them to the conditions you can actually provide removes more frustration from container gardening than any single technique or product. Everything I've covered in this video is more powerful when it's part of a system rather than a series of reactive interventions. The gardeners who never have summer failures, the ones whose containers look thriving in August when everyone else's have given up, are not doing something dramatically more complex than you. They're doing the same things, but at the right time, before the problems arrive, rather than after. Here's the annual soil biology calendar that I now follow across all my containers. Late winter to early spring, soil reset, fresh mix in containers going into the new season, worm castings incorporated at 20% volume, pH tested and adjusted to 6.5 to 7.0, mycorrhizal inoculant applied at transplanting. This is when you build the foundation for the entire growing year. Mid-spring, pre-summer reinforcement, casting tea watered in every 2 weeks as temperatures rise, mulch applied before the first hot spell, container insulation evaluated and installed, pH retested early summer, active monitoring, soil temperature monitored once per week, not air temperature, soil temperature, using an inexpensive probe thermometer. If soil temperature exceeds 30 degrees Celsius consistently, insulation increased and shade considered. Casting tea continued. No synthetic fertilizer. Peak summer, maintenance mode, organic inputs only. Casting tea or liquid seaweed every 2 weeks. Deep and frequent watering. Heat-tolerant crops in production. Vulnerable crops either finished or transitioning. Early autumn. Recovery and rebuild. As temperatures drop, the microbial community naturally rebounds. This is the moment to support that recovery aggressively. Fresh casting top dress, a full watering of casting tea, light organic fertilizer. Autumn is often the most productive season in a container garden because you have spring's biological work, summer's matured soil structure, and autumn's ideal temperatures all working together simultaneously. Late autumn, Chikorastis, Has Einse, soil preparation for winter. Test pH one final time. Add dolomite lime if acidic. Add a layer of mature compost as a surface mulch that will slowly incorporate over winter. Let the soil rest. Following this calendar, summer stops being the season that breaks your garden. It becomes one of 4 seasons you're managing intelligently, each one building on the last, each one preparing for the next. Your summer garden doesn't fail because of the heat. It fails because the heat destroys the biology that your plant depends on to feed itself, and nobody told you that the biology was there in the first place, let alone how to protect it. The watering advice is not wrong. The fertilizer advice is not entirely wrong. But it's treating the branches of the problem while the root, quite literally, goes unaddressed underground. The soil beneath your containers is not just growing medium. It is a living system. It breathes, it feeds, it networks, it defends, and it needs your attention and protection the most at exactly the time of year when most gardening advice stops talking about it. Protect the biology before summer arrives. Restore it when heat damages it. Choose plants that work with summer's conditions rather than against them. And build the annual system that means you're never caught off guard again. The difference between a summer garden that fails and one that thrives is not luck, not a green thumb, not expensive products. It is understanding what is happening underground and responding to that rather than to what you can see above the soil. Make sure to like the video and subscribe it.